2019 was not a great year for superhero movies. And tonight we review two of the worst. Tonight we review Hellboy 2019 and X-Men Dark Phoenix. This is the Superhero Pantheon. On this podcast, we take one superhero film a week and decide whether it should be in the Pantheon, the pile of shame, or somewhere in between. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. You can find additional episodes of this podcast through Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast apps through the real world. We strongly encourage you to leave a 4 or 5 star review so as to help people discover this show and the great work that the folks at the real world are doing. If you would like to interact with us or send feedback, you could do so in 2 ways. First, send an email to superheropantheon@gmail.com. Second, find us on Twitter at HeroPantheon. My co-host for this week and every week will be Brian DeBrain. He can be found on Twitter at Brian DeBrain. Brian, we are reviewing two pretty vile superhero films from last year, and we are very much coming to the end of this volume. Next month, we are going to be reviewing the 3 2019 MCU movies, and then we are going to be able to put this project to bed for the time being, as because of COVID-19, there are not going to be any superhero films coming out until August, maybe even into the fall. So this is our last hurrah, so to speak. And I really just want to get these two movies over with because, let's face it, they are not very good. And it sounds like Dark Phoenix, the first movie that we are going to discuss, has broken you.
Yeah, it just brings back terrible memories, especially when I saw it a year ago. I saw it on a Sunday night, and unfortunately my friend got in a terrible accident that night, so it just brings back all these horrible memories. He, had multiple surgeries and nearly died, but he survived and he needs a hip replacement in a couple of years, but, unfortunately the movie opens up with a horrific car crash as well. So it just brings back terrible memories for me. But at the same time, it's like, well, I guess we have to put this movie to bed because we have to just get it behind us. And it's so weird that we opened last week with Shazam, and it's the same thing, car crash, annoying kid in the back. Yeah, I would be scared shitless of that kid if I was the dad as well, because fucking Jean Grey really was responsible for the death of her mother. And there's no way of getting around it, and that's pretty dark. So they pretty much booked themselves into a corner right off the bat.
Yeah, they make a lot of inexplicable choices in this movie, and there was a big powwow after this movie came out about all of the various issues, and I just want to highlight just a couple of those before we get into the categories. That because of James Cameron's influence, this movie was moved. The due date, the date that it was supposed to come out was shifted from February to June. This is very much not a summer movie. There were, of course, a lot of issues with production. They reshot the ending so it wasn't as similar to Captain Marvel. Just a lot of really bizarre choices. This movie was a big disaster at the box office, like so many other 20th Century Fox movies have been since the big Disney merger. And it's unfortunate because we've talked about the X-Men franchise, and yes, there have been a couple of bad movies along the way, but we've also put multiple movies from this franchise into the superhero. Let's think about this, Brian. 4 movies from this franchise have gone into the superhero pantheon, that being X-Men 2, X-Men United, Logan, X-Men Days of a Future Past, and X-Men First Class. These are 4 movies that I would say are very, very good, and it is unfortunate that we have the Dark Phoenix saga botched once again terribly, and they botched it in different ways this time. I think the first time they botched it, it was because they had an awful director and sexual predator as the director, and this time they just had Simon Kinberg, who is not good at his job. I think they let him write the first version of this, and then they gave him the director's for this time. It is inexplicable to me that Simon Kinberg was given this opportunity. And there are just some names that when they are associated with comic book movies or these kind of big franchises, I have very little confidence. David S. Goyer is another one of those that every time I see his name, I just want to roll my eyes at the fact that he is there. And I think Simon Kinberg is another one of those people. And you could throw Chris Terrio's name in there as well. As these are people who continue to somehow fail upwards, and it's very frustrating because this movie was very, very bad.
I still can't believe that Kinberg wrote Days of Futures Past by himself. I still don't believe it. I guess, I don't know. Sometimes you just get lucky, because that seems to be the best of his bunch, or of his writing bunch. Because, I mean, we love that movie. You and I love Days of Futures Past. Somehow, some way, he got away with the solo writing credit on that. And I still, looking back now, and after watching this movie again of Dark Phoenix, I'm just thinking, like, there's got to be a ghostwriter or something. Like, there's no way he could have wrote that movie by himself. I don't know, man. I'm just blown away that he can take that and then turn it into this and still have continuity issues and all these different things. I thought Deadpool fucking fixed the timeline when he shot all those people at the end, but I guess not, because we still got stuck with this movie. And I don't know, man. It's so weird. And I swear to God, I don't even think they say the word Phoenix in this movie.
Yeah, it's really strange just what happens, because there's a lot of inexplicable choices that get made coming into this movie. And I almost want to pretend that Logan is the movie that really ended this franchise, because this was not a good way to go out. And you have Xavier again invading Jean Grey's mind. This is a concept that they have brought up in other platforms, including X-Men: The Last Stand. And it didn't work then. It doesn't really work here. They somehow expand it, and they basically portray Xavier as a political figure with clear ambitions. And one of the problems with this franchise, the conceit of this franchise, is that they move along every 10 years. So the first movie in this quote-unquote franchise was X-Men First Class, which was 1963. Then they go to 1973 for Days of Future Past, 1983 for Apocalypse. This movie allegedly takes place in 1993. And of course, this is a time period when the X-Men animated series is on. So I don't know if they were trying to make a conscious effort to connect, but based on the quality of the quote-unquote costumes, I have to imagine that's not necessarily the case. But we have Xavier as a political figure with clear ambitions. This is something that, just like X-Men: The Last Stand, when we talked about Xavier being kind of a dick, they do the same thing here. And there is an entire movie to be done about Xavier being a dick. And I think that is something that could work. So there is a movie to be made about Xavier being a dick. This just was not it.
Yeah, I don't know why they had to do this thing about Xavier acting the way he is when he's acting like a totally different person than the last three movies. They build up nothing to it. I feel like they just jump ahead in time, and then all of a sudden we're rediscovering these characters again and again, and it's like these characters are not being the same characters that they were in the previous movies, and it just feels inconsistent all the way through and through. I just can't believe that, like, they took Xavier and they're trying to do it like this, but I don't know why they want him to do that. I don't know what it was, but the whole political thing really throws me off, and it just really just doesn't fit with what I think Xavier should be. I don't know why he's not focused on the kids and the school and everything, but I don't know. And then, of course, the aging thing. Like, he should be in his 50s, and the dude looks like he's in his 30s still, so I don't know what the fuck is going on there. Yeah, it's totally out of place, and I can't even tell that this movie takes place in 93. It just looks so generic in that regard, so I can't even tell what's going on in terms of that. But man, this Xavier is probably the worst interpretation since X-Men 3. And like this whole idea of we got to book Jean Grey to have her parents killed at the beginning, and it's of her fault, and we have to do these flashbacks. It's like, why are we doing this? You know what I mean? But again, I'm just gonna go on a rant if I keep going down that road. But goddamn, man, again, right off the bat, they fucked up with Xavier.
And I think that kind of extends to Jean Grey as well, because Sophie Turner, of course, was cast in the role We see a little bit of her in Apocalypse, but there's nothing to that character. It feels like Famke Janssen at least got a little bit of development in the previous two X-Men movies prior to her run as Phoenix. We don't get any of that with Sophie Turner and her time as Jean Grey. And the weirdest thing, the bizarre thing to me about that choice is that there's that part where we talked about in X-Men Apocalypse when the four kids go to the mall and then we don't see them at the mall. We don't actually see them interacting with human beings, and it's just bizarre. And this script just treats her so terribly, and it's remarkable to me that Sophie Turner was somehow in Game of Thrones, the finale, and that season has gotten a lot of static, and somehow she was actually in something even worse in this movie. Her accent is all over the place. That is something that is worth pointing out. She is desperately trying to hold on to an American accent, and it is not really working out too well. I don't know whether it's because she's around a bunch of other British actors or whether her accent work is just not strong enough. I mean, to me, if it's this much of an issue, then I don't see why you just don't cast an American to play the role. It's just bizarre. The movie is supposed to be centered around her, and there is no possible way that we could care about her because her motivations change from scene to scene. She behaves in really terrible ways throughout this movie, and we have never been given reason to sympathize with her because, again, she was barely in Apocalypse.
I don't buy into this whole idea that she doesn't know what she's doing and she doesn't know what's going on, and it's like we never figure out what the hell is actually going on. You know what I mean? By the end of the movie, I guess she figures out how to control the power of what's inside of her, but we never actually know what the hell is going on inside of her. We don't know if these voices in her head have been influencing her since she was a kid or whatever. I don't know what the hell is going on. And then just her going from scene to scene, not knowing what's going on and not explaining things and not telling Magneto certain things and making that scene worse. And then just like killing people and just like, fucking what she did to the cops was like so irresponsible and reprehensible. It's like, what the fuck, man? Like, you just killed all these innocent people, and by the end of the movie, we're supposed to care for you as like some sympathetic figure? Like, no way! Like, man, I think Xavier did the right thing by blocking out those negative memories, man, because she's so out of control and she doesn't even know what the hell she's doing, and she can't explain anything. So, as an audience, as a person in the audience, just like, what the hell is going on with this character?
And of course, two of the other supposedly main characters are Cyclops and Storm. And the marketing, I think they pretended that these two characters were important. They're really not. I think the power usage of Cyclops is at least a little bit better from a visual standpoint. But again, Storm has zero personality beyond generic dialogue, and it's just frustrating to me because Storm is one of the most interesting characters. This is, again, a franchise that is supposed to be about downtrodden populations, and they always treat their characters of color so terribly. And this is the last time, hopefully, on this podcasting network you will hear about this, because hopefully Storm will be in a good Marvel movie at some point and get the credit that she deserves. But she is given absolutely nothing to do. Brian, I know that you are a fan of Ready Player One, but for me, Ty Sheridan is just another one of those guys. He is one of those mediocre white dudes like the Jai Courtneys and the Sam Worthingtons. And I'm rapidly approaching a point where if he is in a movie, the movie is death. And it is best symbolized by the one F-bomb that is in this movie. And the thing about it is, the thing that's so ironic about this is the best F word or the best use of fuck that has probably ever been in a PG-13 movie was probably in X-Men First Class. That scene is iconic. It is maybe the best character moment that Wolverine has ever had when he tells Magneto and Xavier to go fuck themselves. And then here you have this empty vessel of a movie, and you have Cyclops just using this F-bomb completely out of nowhere, with no context, with almost no feeling behind it. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah, the thing with Storm is, like, I don't know where she develops this relationship with Xavier, that she's willing to sacrifice herself. Like, we never see that relationship develop. all we see is her being the bad guy in Apocalypse, and by the end of Apocalypse, she just joins the X-Men. I don't think they even talk. I don't even think there's a scene of Xavier and Storm talking in Apocalypse for more than like 10 seconds or something. And all of a sudden, we're supposed to buy into this relationship that she's willing to sacrifice herself for. I don't know. There's so many gaps in like the storytelling that we're supposed to just buy into certain things, and it's just like, well, I guess, they have this relationship, and I guess Xavier's a dick now, and I guess Cyclops is trying to be a leader even though he's kind of incompetent. So I don't know. It's weird, and I can't believe they just, I don't know. I don't know what they expect from the audience to just buy into some of this stuff, and I don't know what Kinberg was thinking. Like, this doesn't even connect with the same continuity of the characters the way they were acting in the previous 2 or 3 movies, man, and I just don't get why he wrote it this way. Something seems weird and off. But man, it's so frustrating, and just this whole breakdown of the X-Men, it just sucks. And then I want to talk about Nightcrawler, because I just feel like there is no character development with that guy at all, especially in this movie. He's just there. Like, he's literally just there. He gets mad once, and I think that's it. I felt like we saw the best Nightcrawler in the first 5 minutes of X-Men 2 and got more character development and that. And then here, he's just like some dude. He's just some dude in the background who's not even using his powers to his full potential, and he's acting like a kid even though he's supposed to be in his 20s. So I don't know what the fuck's going on anymore.
Yeah, they just have Nightcrawler there specifically to teleport people. It almost feels like they introduced him in Apocalypse for the sole reason of creating the visual connection between himself and like Michael Jackson and that kind of 80s ambiance. And then here they just have him teleporting people. That's literally what his role is. And I think this has been a major problem with the X-Men franchise, is just having characters in the movie because it's quote unquote cool and not because they actually have anything for them to do. See the Dazzler. The Dazzler is in this movie for like 30 seconds. And the only reason that she is probably in it as kind of a quote-unquote Easter egg is because she plays a focal point in the Dark Phoenix saga in both the animated series as well as in the comic book. So how bizarre is that? We have Dazzler for 30 seconds, completely forgot about it.
Yeah, that goes back all the way to the first X-Men movie when you see Jubilee in the background for like 30 seconds, and it's like, wait a minute, can we get Jubilee like to talk and have lines and stuff like that? No. And even then, we don't even get her now, and we got her for like 10 minutes, maybe less than 10 minutes, like 2 minutes in Apocalypse, and I was hoping that we could finally get Jubilee as a fully fleshed out character by the 90s, and no, she's not even in this movie, I think, so I don't know, what the fuck, man, and it's just like, God, like, what a waste of time, and like, no development of these characters, like, and the Quicksilver thing is so weird, because like, I felt like maybe something happened, and they just wrote him out of the script, out of the first act completely. And then
Brian, I believe that actually is what happened. I believe he just does have other commitments with like American Horror Story and things like that. So I believe that might be why he was written out.
Unbelievable. Why even have him in the movie in the first place? And there's no payoff with him and Magneto, man. What the They built it up for 2 movies and they had no payoff to it. And they're in the same movie. Oh my God. And he's supposed to be in his 40s, man. What the hell? I don't know.
I've never seen Brian this flustered. This is pretty incredible. I'm giving this a 2.
1 for me. This movie will not make me break my rule of giving a 0, but goddamn, it's close.
So I gave it double what you did, and it's still only a 2. Let's get to the villains. I didn't even know where to place Magneto because just like the last 3 X-Men movies, Magneto is in retirement and trying to hide away, and they keep bringing him back. I just realized that we forgot to talk about Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique, which is pretty ironic because I feel like Jennifer Lawrence also forgot to act in this movie. And Brian, she perhaps has the worst line of any of the X-Men movies when she talks about women saving the men. That line has 0 context behind it because if you remember the last 2 X-Men movies, women have actually been the problem. If you look at Apocalypse, Mystique was a problem. Days of the Future Past, Mystique was really the problem. So I genuinely found that to be really offensive. And they're kind of going for this pop culture. They're going for this pop feminism thing, just like with Avengers Endgame and all the women doing their thing. This was even worse. And I'm going to connect it back because Magneto I actually wrote down the timestamp that he appears. He appears at the 54-minute mark with exactly 1 hour to go in this movie. So he is only in it for about half the time. And what does he want to do? He wants to get revenge on Jean Grey because Jean Grey murdered Raven. Magneto tried to kill Mystique in Days of a Future Past. This literally happened, does not get acknowledged.
Yeah, I know. I know. And he just keeps going back and forth like the Big Show. And yeah, that's a wrestling reference. And it's exactly like that, man, because he keeps going back and forth. And then, I don't know, like 30 minutes later, they're on that fucking train, and all of a sudden he's trying to save her. And all, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, we've read to mention Beast. Beast does this total 180. He wants to kill Jean Grey now, and like tries to join Magneto, but like, fuck, man, like, I don't know. Same thing. 30 minutes later, he's trying to save her. It's like that whole thing about wanting to kill her goes out the window. Yeah, man. I just, yeah. And the thing with Magneto is like, they're on Genosha. Genosha is this kind of like iconic thing in the X-Men lore, and they just fucking brush it off as if it's nothing. Like, how the hell did he get the land in the first place? Like, after all the events from even Apocalypse, like, I'm surprised the government gave him all this land. And, you know, how did the people get there? Blah, blah, blah. And they don't even explore any of that, and they just lay it in the background. I don't even think they say the word Genosha. And, like, I don't know, Jean Grey just shows up. She's flying out of nowhere. She knows how to get there somehow. What the fuck is going on, man?
There's also Jessica Chastain with the white hair. She is playing, I believe it is pronounced Vuk. It is never. You want to talk about things that don't get uttered in the movie. The name of Jessica Chastain's character does not get mentioned in this movie. There is an alien subplot, Brian. There is an alien subplot. They exist, and they are kind of the foils for the final battle. Chastain has her hair dyed. She is emotionless. Why do we put actors in this position? I do not understand this. And the funny thing is that Jessica Chastain is a fantastic performer. She's a really good actor, and she gets nothing to do in this movie. And it's so frustrating. Nobody in this movie is given anything to work with. And I can't even blame the actors at a certain point because the writing is just so bad. And especially the scene when Magneto and Jean Grey are fighting over the helicopter. I mean, that scene, like, that is something that I would expect almost in a parody of one of these movies, but it just looks so goofy and it doesn't work at all. And man, I'm hating this movie the more I'm talking about it. I'm giving this a 1.
Yeah, me too. I'm just so confused as to why even the alien subplot, like, it didn't even need to be in the movie at all. And they just threw it in there. And I think they wanted to do the Skrulls, but that's just my conspiracy theory because of the whole changing of the ending from the Captain Marvel thing. So maybe that's just me being conspiracy theory, but goddamn, man, they sure look like it acted like Skrulls to me, which is weird. And then the fact that I don't even know what they want. They want the power to do what? Their planet was destroyed by this unnamed thing that was just supposed to be the Phoenix power or whatever. I don't know, man. It's off the rails.
Yeah, it's pretty awful. So the story of this movie, the X-Men actually start out by going into space. Jean Grey is, of course, a beloved X-Men from the past, but within the context of this movie, she has almost no character development. Of course, Xavier has a private phone to the president, and he sends his team out into space. Jean is exposed to a dark and ancient power. It is not the same power from the animated series or the comic. Jean Grey becomes a homicidal maniac. She basically hits puberty, so to speak, and becomes evil. And it's so weird because it doesn't come from within. I mean, it's just, oh my God. So there's also the alien subplot. We get Mystique dying about 45 minutes into this movie. And what I wanted to specifically focus on with the story is there's a lot of negative things that I can say about this movie, but just some of the action set pieces, there's something about them that not only does it look right, it looks cheap, but everything gets shot really wide. There's no stakes whatsoever to this. And I don't know. I feel like even the Marvel movies, the way that the Russo brothers shoot action sometimes is that you get a sense of scope, you get a sense of what is happening. And I think Joss Whedon probably has done the best job of any Marvel director of shooting action because I'm of course referring to the big Avengers, the scene in New York, which I think is probably one of the best things that Marvel's ever done. Compare that to this movie, and it's just all over the place. And admittedly, the train stuff, there's a couple cool moments, but especially that scene when it's broad daylight and they're at Jean's dad's house, and there's like three people there, and Quicksilver gets his leg broken, and Mystique goes out in really terrible fashion, and there's like two police officers there. It's remarkable to me that this movie cost $200 million, and then you just end up with a scene like that. That's something like if this movie had a movie of like if it had a budget of $50 million, I would at least understand that scene. But it just felt very, very cheap, and like nobody cares.
I'm just really frustrated that they went out of their way to recreate a death scene at Jean Grey's house, just like Xavier in X-Men 3. I was just like, no, please don't go to Jean Grey's house. Please don't, because I know you're going to try to do the same thing, and it's just going to be just as awful. And he did it, man. He's trying to recreate all the scenes from X-Men 3, man. And that, I think that's what broke me. Maybe the first time I felt in the theater like, okay, no, please don't do, and then they did it, and then I felt like, oh my God. Second time around, I just felt completely broken. Like, God, even the beginning, it's like we got a flashback to Jean Grey as a kid or whatever in her origin story. And it's like beat for beat, he's trying to recreate X-Men 3. And it's like, out of all the movies in the world you want to recreate X-Men 3. Like, did someone not sit this guy down and be like, dude, stop what you're doing. Like, we're not recreating X-Men 3. And they did, and they go back to the house. Oh, my God. I'm just blown away. And then one of the action sequences is them trying to cross a fucking street to get to Jean Grey. And Beast is, like, stopping traffic and destroying cars for no reason whatsoever. You're just trying to cross the street, and you're destroying cars. And at one point, Magneto pulls a subway train from the fucking subway through the concrete and doesn't even do really much with it at all. Just to break open a wall, you could have just walked through the front door, man. What the hell is going on? Why are we spending all this money on these weird action sequences when they can just cross the street? And then you got the thing with the train, which is, you know, he put that together last minute. It's a totally different third act, and everything feels small and enclosed because you put everything on a fucking train. Why are we even putting the X-Men on a train? Like, we got jets and helicopters from the 70s and 80s, and we're putting these people on a fucking train in 1993 to travel. I don't know what the fuck, man. It should not have been on a train to begin with. And then you got these aliens coming out of nowhere. Ugh, I don't know, man. What the fuck did the aliens want? I don't know, man. A 1. 1.
I'm giving this a 2, but you certainly make a strong argument for 1. The one thing I will say to you, Brian, is Snowpiercer is a really, really excellent movie that does take place on a train. And just because it's on a train doesn't mean it's bad. But Simon Kinberg is no Bong Joon-ho. That might be the problem.
Listen, I'm all for trains and movies and stuff, but dude, the X-Men on a train, that's how you're going to transport these mutant people on a train? What? When you got jets?
Believe me, again, we are going into space also at this point, and yeah, there's a lot wrong with this movie, and the technical parts. You have a very generic score, some pretty bad visuals. The action sequences are just, as we mentioned, not very good. The pacing of this movie is really bizarre. Brian, I'm going to let you talk. I mean, the suits are your area, and what I want you to do is just point out what the suits were like at the end of X-Men Apocalypse versus what we get in this movie.
I mean, at least Apocalypse had like decent colors, but like again, they just went with the generic looking blue and yellow. But like, I felt like you're right. Like, if it's 93, do the actual X-Men fucking uniforms from the show. It's not that hard. And then we talk about this being in the 90s, but there's no way to distinguish that fact. It looks like it just takes place in some generic time. And like, at least in X-Men Days of Futures Past, that it looked like, 70s. You know what I mean? It looked like the 70s. Even Apocalypse, despite not going to the mall when they should have went to the mall. Like, it looked like the 80s. This did not look like 93 at all. It just looked like some generic time. And like, God, like, I don't know. And the CGI, I'll say this, it looked good when they went to space, but then the CGI with the aliens and them just like absorbing the bullets, and then you got the shit with the being on the train. I don't know, man. Everything just looks small scale when you went on that fucking train and everything after that. And then the Phoenix Force going through their body, and then they started looking too fake at that point. And then, I mean, at least Cyclops' eyes look good. I'll give it that. But fuck, man. Like, I can't believe Hans Zimmer has his name attached to this for the score. And I know you probably didn't even realize that, but this is Hans Zimmer. So fuck, man. That's got to be probably one of the worst credits to his name. So I'll go with a 4, only because it's not so, like, the CGI is not so terrible that it's completely off the rails, but it does look bad at times. But I did like the beginning with the space look when they went into space, so I'll give it that. And the space stuff did look good, but other than that, it's just like the suits completely boring, man. And for an X-Men movie, I mean, God, even at the end of First Class, Magneto looked like such a boss in that color that they put him in, and they just took all that away.
It's infuriating to me. I can't give this higher than a 2. I'm sorry. It's just bad, and I'm not going to say that anybody who worked on this should be ashamed, but Simon Kinberg specifically, if you look at the way that things have been done in this franchise, and then you look at the way that this just kind of petered out, it sucks, and it's really unfortunate, and it connects to the legacy directly. This 20th Century Fox's version of the X-Men, if it wasn't going to die before this movie, this would have killed it officially. There is no way you can come back from this, and may we never speak of this again. I'm giving this a straight up 0.
Well, I'm going with the 1 because you know my rule, but I can't believe that he purposely broke continuity with the movies that he already wrote, because we know the end of Days of Futures Past where they all come back and it's 2016, and they're all teaching at the school, and you got Kelsey Grammer and Femke Jansen and all the originals. But then fucking, I don't know, she turns into Phoenix in 1993 and goes off into space, and I don't know what the fuck's going on. So what, we just assume she comes back? So fuck, man, they just ruined the legacy of the continuity and the franchise, and this grossed $65 million domestically. Do you know how crazy that is for an X-Men movie to gross that much domestically? I mean, God, everyone knew it was going to be bad going in, but everyone had that feeling, man. And yeah, it killed the franchise, dead in the water. And that's why I don't want New Mutants to come out almost at all at this point. I know it probably should be, it's streaming, but again, I called it, man. For as long as this podcast has been running, I've been saying New Mutants will not be released in theaters, and unfortunately, I'm probably going to be right on that one. So
It's funny because we are recording this on the day New Mutants was supposed to come to theaters.
Well, there goes my timing again. There's something about the timing on this podcast that comes full circle and everything. So,
all right, let's shift from one terrible superhero movie to another. Let's talk about, well, actually, we got to give our scores first. So, my score, this shows you how much I want to get away from this. My score is a 7.
8 from me.
Totals of 15. X-Men Dark Phoenix, congratulations on going directly into the pile of shame, joining just such illustrious movies as Green Lantern, Catwoman, and both Ghost Rider movies, as well as Fantastic Four 2015. Congratulations.
Yeah, and Wolverine Origins, I think, or maybe that missed the cut. I'm not sure, but
I think it just missed the cut.
Well, then this is the first X-Men movie in the pile of shame.
And well deserved. All right, let's talk about Hellboy. I don't really have a lot to say about this movie. For me, when just looking at some of the categories and starting with the heroes, I think fundamentally for me, the problem with this movie, Hellboy, is that absolutely nobody in this movie comes off as likable. And that goes from David Harbour's version of Hellboy to Ian McShane to Daniel Day Kim, and just so many of the characters. They're just unlikable. And it's very frustrating to me because I think one of the things that we really appreciated about Guillermo del Toro's version of this franchise is that he was able to take weird characters and make them beloved. And it just feels like this was I almost want to say a cynical, like, cash-in But Hellboy is not a huge franchise, and the fact that this movie just fundamentally does not work for me from start to finish, I think is a major problem. And it's I just walked away being very frustrated. And when I look at the director's credits, there are a lot of things in his filmography that I've not enjoyed, and you can certainly add this because I think the heroes just come off very, very poorly. I know that you do not hate this movie as much as I do, though.
I don't hate it as much, but my scores are pretty low only because I got to be objective about it. But I couldn't help myself when I laughed I don't know, every 5 minutes or so at Hellboy's one-liners. I was like, okay, that's funny. I guess I just understand the humor that they were going for, but at the same time, it's like it's missing that fantastical, mythical fantasy feeling. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the reason that Hellboy 2 especially I think works is it's got that mystical kind of feeling to it. And this has a little bit of that, but just like the uber violent aspect of it. It's almost like comparing like playing a Lord of the Rings game, which that would be like the Hellboy 1 and 2, and then playing like the new Doom game or something where it's like uber graphic and violent and over the top and just so gruesome. And that's where I guess that's what they wanted, like an R-rated hardcore Hellboy version, but it was missing the fun, and there's no fun in this movie. Although I get the jokes that he was trying to get, and they're very like dry wit kind of humor. I get that. That's sort of some of my style, so I get that. But overall, it completely missed the boat on a lot what they were going for. Because then it becomes this thing where it's like they got this very hard, violent tone, and then you got Hellboy doing these weird one-liners that I kind of laughed here and there for. But again, it just doesn't match the tone of what they were trying to do. And then the budget, really, you can kind of by the halfway through the movie, you can see where the budget kind of like hindered it. I mean, it's cool that they got the practical thing with David Harbour and the suit that he's got on, but everything else, like the CGI, really gets wonky, especially like when he's fighting the giants. Like you start noticing like halfway through that scene, like it's all weird, like CGI green screen sets because you can tell like he's moving around in a set and the way that the camera's moving around. So all that put together, it didn't add up to a full theatrical experience that I think Hellboy deserves, but it just felt like the way this was budgeted out, it should have just been a 6-episode miniseries, because that's what it felt like by the end, because I can kind of tell, like, there's like 6 parts to this movie. It's like the stuff with the giants is like its own part, the stuff with the hill at the middle of the movie where she comes back and gets her powers, the stuff at the end is like a whole other episode. It just felt like a series of like 20 to 25-minute episodes put together, and the narrative really didn't fit like a singular narrative because it kept like jumping, especially since like 2/3 into the movie we end up with like Merlin at all people, fucking Merlin from the Excalibur tale and legend, and all of a sudden we got this fucking thing where like Hellboy is all of a sudden this descendant of Excalibur, where his great 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 grandmother had sex with a demon in 1574 or something like that. It's just weird shit that they just brought out of nowhere.
And Rasputin was also in this movie as well, just as he was in the first Del Toro movie.
Yeah, and did you notice Thomas Hayden Church is the lobster?
Yeah, that was really random. I was like, really? Thomas Hayden Church is in this movie? It was just bizarre. I'm giving the hero score a 1. Again, I think the problem with the humor, so much of it is there's a lot of punching down that goes on. And for me, I'm at a point where when you're doing that kind of humor, it's very unfunny to me when people are just punching down, or they're making making fun of somebody because of their looks, or because they're not man enough, or shit like that. It's like just Ian McShane's whole character was a huge turnoff for me. So I'm giving this a 1.
I'll go with a 3, only because I felt like there was a ton of potential, but they just had this weird dark tone to it. And yeah, Ian McShane's a great actor. It's just like, this role does not need the dude from Deadwood fucking yelling at you and cussing at you. He needs like that soft, kind heart, like warm-hearted old man to comfort you. And that definitely was not the role that he played in this movie. He was fucking the dude from Deadwood up through and through, and that's kind of what we know Ian McShane for. He's even more vulgar than he is in John Wick in this movie. So
Ian McShane is so much better in John Wick than he is in this movie. I'll tell you what. The villains, I almost completely forgot that Mila Jovovich is in this movie. And has she ever been in like a good movie? this is a serious question because the Resident Evil movies are not good. She was in Ultraviolet. That movie is not good. Seriously, has she ever been in a good movie? Because it really sucks.
I've got two, and I think they were like close to back to back, almost in years.
Okay,
Uh,
here we go.
Dazed and Confused,
Okay, I'll accept that. I mean, she's a small role, right?
right? Very very small role, and of course, Dallas Multipass, Fifth Element.
Okay, I will grant you those two. But just think about the years that those two movies came out, and we are sitting here in the year 2020.
That's what I'm saying. I think ever since Resident Evil, she got into this rut of like just being stuck in these B movies. Because I mean, she did all the Resident Evil sequels, and it felt like this. Look, my friend of mine, one of my best friends, loves those movies to death, and he's like, "Just give me these. These are my guilty pleasure. I love her in these movies, and I know they're B movies, and he just loves them anyway." So I get it. She just embraces that B movie kind of role, and that's why I think when you cast her in this role, it automatically makes her movie that B level kind of movie, and they kind of booked themselves into a corner with this casting because that's what it ended up feeling like, because she doesn't have the acting chops to bring certain roles like this to a little higher standard. You know what I mean? It just feels like, B movie nonsense the way she's talking because of this ridiculousness of the role of this blood queen. So yeah, it's just all about casting, I guess, and working with this right amount of people. But as of right now, her career is pretty B movie ridden. So
Yeah, it's just very generic. There's almost no pathos to the villains. I'm also giving this a 1.
yeah, I'm gonna go with a one on this one. And I just felt like there was just so many different things they were throwing at us in terms of villains. This movie had the opening had vampires. 15 minutes later, we had giants. 20 minutes later, we had Baba Yaga, which is that thing from the Marvel universe with Ant-Man 2. It turns out to be the crazy woman from Wonder Woman, the crazy doctor lady, and she's like cooking children. And then they're throwing what else did they throw at us? Talking warthog they threw at us. They threw all these fucking things at us. And then we got a werewolf transformation that ended up being a cheetah at the end. So there's all these things going on from all these different horror genres just thrown right at you. And then we got like a butthole coming out of the hole of hell at the end of the movie eating people or something.
Yeah, the CGI blood in this movie just really disturbed me for some reason. I am generally not a fan of CGI blood, but especially in this movie, it really felt gross and just grotesque at a certain point. From a story perspective, this feels like a carbon copy of the first two, except with less style, bad jokes. And again, a lot of the humor is punching down. I really do like the last 2 minutes of this movie. And I don't know if they reshot it with a different director, but if you told me that somebody else directed that scene, I would absolutely believe you because the energy and the rhythm to that final sequence feels completely different from everything else in the movie. It feels like there's momentum. It feels like it's fun. It feels like there's cohesion to the team. The team actually likes each other. They're not bickering with each other. And I really like that last 2 minutes or so. And if that had been the start of this movie, I think I actually would have been way more interested, especially with the way the movie ends properly. But this was not good. This was very bad. I'm also giving this a 2.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a two as well. And it's just the same thing. Like that was the best part of the movie. And like I think they just gotta like I don't know, man. Maybe they got to do the Spider-Man thing where they just got to just jump in and not do the origin story anymore. And because we know the origin story, he comes from a hole from hell from 1941 or whatever, and Nazis and blah 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 and Rasputin and all that. We know that. So if they would have just started out with that and this team, and then you introduce this team where they find Abe Sapien at the beginning of the movie, and then they take on the team that try to take control of Abe Sapien. There's your movie right there. You don't need some stupid Blood Queen to make it feel like this weird King Arthur ripoff in modern era with Hellboy. So just all kinds of weird stuff. Yeah, I just can't believe Merlin was in this movie, and they revealed that fucking I don't know, man. Just the descendant of King Arthur having sex with a goat demon? What the fuck?
I don't even know what to say at this point. The technical parts, the designs look really cheap. The pacing sucks. David Harper does not look as good as Ron Perlman as Hellboy. And one of the things that David Harper recently was talking about, I guess somebody asked him about this movie, and he put a lot of the blame on fans of Guillermo del Toro. And I kind of get what he was going for, but whenever you blame the fans for a movie not doing well, you are not endearing yourself to those same fans who you expect to then go out and support your other projects, especially because my guess is a lot of the same people who potentially will see Hellboy will also be considering whether or not they want to go see Black Widow and also possibly Stranger Things. I think it's just a really, really bad look, just like his look was in this movie. And for some reason, I don't know about you, Brian, but younger Hellboy actually creeped me out more than the modern version. I don't know if that you felt that way too.
I don't know. It was weird because at certain times I liked the look of what they were doing with this live, actual. There's no CGI on him, but then everything else is just this weird CGI, and it just threw me off. And it's just like it's so inconsistent. And I know what you're saying about young Hellboy. Even younger when he flashed back to when he saves the girl as a baby, it's like he's got this weird goatee. I don't know how he ages, but like I guess he's like, I don't know, 500 years old if he was born in 1574 in hell or something. But yeah, just the soundtrack, at least it tried. I mean, they did play Alice Cooper. I thought that was really cool at one point. But then the stuff on the fucking hill, and it's just like you see these goblins or whatever the fuck they are on the side of the hill, and it just like looks like cheap CGI from like 2002. And I'm thinking like, God, the Lord of the Rings has way better CGI than this, and that was from 2003. So it's like they really, they probably relied too much on CGI. And once they realized they were limited on the budget, they had to like put a lot of these CGI scenes in the dark, and you can barely see how bad the CGI is, especially in that scene. And then the end, like you said, you hate the fake digital blood, and I get what you're saying on that. And it was just so random with all these demons coming out and killing people, and almost like no repercussions 6 months later. So it's just weird stuff with the tech, because like, I mean, at least they played Alice Cooper, and they did a practical effect with the suit, but everything else just seems like, okay, they just kind of ran out of ideas, you know what I mean? And everything didn't look as nice and like fantastical and awesome, especially compared to Hellboy 2. Like I think Hellboy 2 like really takes that idea of doing like that fantasy kind of aspect and just heightening it. Here you didn't really get that. It was just like weird grotesque horror, and I'm not really into that kind of visual, so I'll give it a 4.
I'm giving this a 2. I really did not like this at all, and yeah, this movie almost robbed me of my soul. I watched this and Dark Phoenix back to back, and that was not a good idea. Let me tell you, do not ever do that. If you have your HBO Go or your HBO Now, do not watch these two movies back to back. The Legacy, as I always do with movies that I think just completely ruin the legacy of a franchise, I give it a 0, and as I am doing here, this movie may as well not have even existed. It is a total disaster. I cannot imagine us seeing a Hellboy movie for a really, really long time.
I'll go with a 2 only because if they asked David Harbour to come back for like some animation thing, I wouldn't be surprised, because I think his voice is like why they picked him for Hellboy, because like he's got that dark, gritty kind of voice. And it can be sarcastic. I get why they picked him, but yeah, maybe animated some kind of follow up. And kind of maybe follow up with these characters, because I think there's something you can build on it. Like we both like the last 2 minutes, so if they can just build on that for an animated.
This movie bombed so bad, I can't imagine them coming back to it with how poorly this movie did. I mean, you want to talk about doing poorly? This movie did even worse than Dark Phoenix.
Yeah, but animated, cheap, Lionsgate, maybe they can pull something off. I don't know, but again, that just shows transferring properties from what was it, 20th Century Fox, I think it was, to Lionsgate, and Lionsgate doesn't really have the money to treat their properties well sometimes, so I think there you go.
My total score is a 6.
Wow, I doubled yours. 12, and still, it's in the pile of shame.
Yep, so we once again put 2 movies into the pile of shame, as we did with both Ghost Riders. This is not good. I mean, these 2 movies are the worst of 2019, and 2019 was a very frustrating year for the box office. 2020 is going to be a disaster at the box office, and there really isn't a lot else to say. I think we've seen good versions of the X-Men. We've seen good versions of Hellboy. Unfortunately, these 2 movies just were not good versions of those particular franchises, and there's a lot of blame that can go around. Should they have tried to bring back Guillermo del Toro? Perhaps. Should X-Men have just called it a day and gone to Disney? Perhaps. But regardless, these two movies have gone into the pile of shame, and all we have to do is get through the burning questions. Special edition of the burning questions, because I don't really want to ask anything about the movies. So we're going to be asking about paychecks for most of these. But we're going to start off by asking the most important question, Brian. Will Sophie Turner ever be in a franchise that ends well?
Yeah. I don't know what franchise, but there's a lot of possibilities. She's still really young. Maybe she's got to play her gambling odds better. You know what I mean? She's 0 for 2, I guess.
I would say 0 for 2. I think that's fair. And I really hope that she can get into a franchise that ends well for her sake, because, I mean, this is pretty rough. What did Ian McShane do with his paycheck from Hellboy?
Okay, so he bought a bunch of scotch and some cigars and a couple of nice suits.
Yeah, I think a couple nice suits. Perhaps a nice mustache shaver for when he then went on and filmed the Deadwood movie, perhaps, and maybe some nice, some hair cream so he can keep that slick back look that he's got going on. But yeah, I think that's about what he would do. What did Jennifer Lawrence do with the paycheck from Dark Phoenix?
Probably got a new iPad, new iPhone or something like that. It's probably around 2018. Maybe invested some stock. And what stock, I don't know. Maybe also she took a trip to Disneyland before they opened up the Star Wars land.
Yeah, I think that all sounds logical. I think that's a very distinct possibility for all of those. I don't really have good answers except for the Mila Jovovich one. So let's go to, what did Jessica Chastain do with the paycheck from Dark Phoenix? I am hoping that she used it to buy the best hair dye in the world, and that we never see her with white hair again.
Yeah, that was pretty weird. What did she do with the money? Well, let's say she saved it up. Maybe she invested too, and maybe because she seems like she's smart with money and not going around and doing MC Hammer type stuff and just blowing it all on things. So I say she saved it, and hopefully she has a good agent, because she deserved a hell of a lot more than probably what she got paid on that movie.
I do love that your reference for bad money spending is MC Hammer.
That's my go-to. Ever since I heard that story about bacon.
For our listeners who may be younger, who may not know what you mean, will you tell the story of MC Hammer and bacon?
I think it's from the TV movie where he's just like got all this money from his first paycheck from the first his first hit album, and then all of a sudden he's like, pick the most expensive bacon on the menu and just order it because we got all this money, baby. And that was like this microcosm and symbolism of all his the way he treated money. He just spent it on random expensive shit, like random expensive bacon that he didn't really need.
Unbelievable. What did Mila Jovovich do with the paycheck from Hellboy? I would like to think that she gave some of that money to Bernie Sanders, as she is officially a listed donator to his campaign. So in my head, she took that money and actually did something good with it. So what did she do, Brian? What do you think?
Well, hopefully she did it for this year's campaign, because if she did it in 4 or 5 years ago, it was probably not worth the trouble. But this is after the 2016 election. So yeah, she donated the money, and maybe she got like a VR PlayStation 4 headset and got the new Resident Evil game or something like that. Something Resident Evil video game related, so we can just tie everything together with a nice bow. So.
All right. I appreciate you doing that, Brian. We have talked about 2 terrible movies. We have covered so many bad movies in these first 90 days of 2020, making our lives even more of a hellscape. We are taking next week off, though, Brian, because I will be reviewing season 4 of Breaking Bad with one Kevin Ford, and I'm very excited to do that.
Has your hate for Skyler risen?
Not really. I generally do not have an issue with Skyler. I think a lot of the criticism that I have seen about Skyler is invalid. There is some criticism that is valid that I will not discuss on this podcast, because I do not want to spoil elements of Breaking Bad for those who are not listening or following along. But you should definitely go back and listen to the first 3 seasons, watch the first 3 seasons, because it is very good TV, and you all have a lot of time on your hands with COVID-19 I shouldn't say that. If you don't have kids, you probably have time. But if you have kids, maybe you have even less time. But still, find the time to watch Breaking Bad and listen to what Kevin and I have to say about season 4 next week on Real Bad. And then in 2 weeks, Brian, we have 3 movies left. And we will be starting with Captain Marvel from last year. We will be reviewing that. It is on the Disney Plus, so you can follow along with us and watch that movie quite easily.
Yeah, and with all the downtime at work, I could probably watch that while watching security cameras at 4 a.m. on a Saturday night. So there you go.
That's outstanding. And our final 2 movies that we will be reviewing, we're going to go a little bit out of order, but I think you'll understand why. We will be reviewing Spider-Man Far From Home, and then our season finale, fittingly, Brian, Avengers Endgame.
It's pretty fitting too because I've been unintentionally binge watching Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends on Disney Plus because I was just like looking for a random show to put on the background, and it still holds up, man. And so I'm thinking, like, if you want to finally do a real good Peter Parker in college movie, do it with Iceman and Firestar, I should say. And give me that as live action. But we can talk about that when we talk about Spider-Man, because I'm all about Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends right now, and give me a Spider-Man team-up movie. So
yes, or at least just a Spider-Man team-up movie, and stop making him baby Tony Stark. Just please stop doing that. For Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening to our show this week. We will be back again in 2 weeks for Captain Marvel.
I guess we really, really are in the end game now.